Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here are your hosts, Joe Kuzma and Brian E. Roach.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and today I am joined by the peanut butter to my jelly, Mr. Brian E. Roach. Brian, how you doing?
I'm so happy to be peanut butter that I can't even tell you. I like peanut butter.
You like peanut butter on toast?
No, toast is bad. Toast is evil. I like peanut butter on bread.
Jelly and jam on toast, that goes very, very well together, almost like peanut butter and jelly. I wonder who...
I got a toast update for you. Are you ready for this?
All right, I'm interested.
I like a toasted English muffin.
All right, that's acceptable. We're making progress. This is like
that's 12... as far as it goes. The rest of that toasted bread, that's crap. That's it. The English muffin, I'm good with it.
Well, then you're already off the path. Then I was going to say it's like the 12 steps to toast, but you're not going to make it all the way. By the way, no. You know, everybody knows open the show. I try to some smart aleck anecdote between us being some dynamic duo, and I had to look up all these votes that people have for like the most. What was this? Like most iconic, best duos of all time. This is what came up in my search. You know who number one is? Wild guess.
I don't know.
We've used a few of these. Number 2 is Batman and Robin. Number 3 is Bert and Ernie. Number 1 is Tom and Jerry. You're actually old enough to remember that cartoon.
Tom and Jerry, these guys ruled the box office, man. They were awesome.
And then the top 5, Scooby-Doo and Shaggy, and then Han Solo and Chewbacca. And if yeah, I knew you would go there. I'm obviously Chewbacca because I'm the giant. And then there's a very fitting one. Peanut Butter and Jelly's next. Mario and Luigi. You know who we are in that scenario. If we were plumbers. Hamburgers and French fries, macaroni and cheese, and Lennon and McCartney, which that could have been very interesting. But anyways, I digress. We have football to talk about today. Let's talk about a couple of things. Did you get to see any of the AAF by any chance?
I watched a little bit of the Saturday night game. I watched a little bit of a couple of the games on Sunday. I thought that it was interesting.
Interesting. I thought it was all right. It wasn't terrible. It was watchable. Some more than others.
Okay. Yeah.
I like the pace.
Some of it was terrible.
Well, Christian Hackenberg is just...
There you go. Because unfortunately, that's one of the games I got to watch a little bit of on Sunday, and that was terrible.
Oh, man. Let me tell you, we've talked many times how there aren't 32 starting quarterbacks in the NFL. There is certainly not even 8.
There are 0 in this league.
The AAF, yeah. I don't know. It was okay. I like the Birmingham Iron put on a decent defensive showing there. I mean, it was a field goal contest, and then you had the other game. The game that I didn't get to see because it was like the 2 that were played Saturday night, 8 p.m. Eastern time. They were like regionally broadcast. So I think I caught San Antonio, San Diego, I think was the one I caught, which wasn't bad. And then the other game was a complete blowout. But then there was, I think it was the Arizona Hotshots, and I'm trying to think who the other team was. That was the later game on Sunday. And that game was actually, there's some offense to it. It has promise. I think it was a good showing for the first weekend. You know what? Let's face it. The opening weekend of the NFL is pretty terrible itself. So
yeah, it's true.
Yeah,
can't blame there.
So we'll see how this goes. We'll see if it goes up, if it maintains, or if it just falls off a cliff. But it looks like a nice. It looks like something that's at least on TV, other than, I don't know. I want to say even hockey because I can't stand what the Penguins are doing right now. But anyways, we're going to talk free agency today when it comes to NFL, but there was some news about a player getting signed by the Cleveland Browns. That would be Kareem Hunt, and not getting into all the off-field things you already know about him. I'm quite surprised that the Browns would make such a move like that. I didn't see any financial terms necessarily discussed, but, you go from the Browns, having some. I was telling you how I was getting needled by Cleveland fans just a week ago. You have to admit the Browns are on the upswing and this and that. I'm like, well, they just got rid of the coach that turned them around. They got rid of one coach that had them in a hole, who, by the way, was one of the AAF commentators or broadcast booth guys. And I'm like, oh, geez, he was like about like dry. I don't know. Can you listen to paint dry? Because it's about as bad as it is watching it. Hearing or listening for paint to dry is Marvin Lewis. Or I'm sorry, it wasn't Hugh Jackson. I'm sorry. Marvin Lewis was in there making that Bengals connection. But Marvin Lewis was in the booth. I'm sorry. I'm talking about Hugh Jackson getting canned. And, they get Greg Williams to fill in, and Greg Williams does an admirable job. And then I guess he's booted out for the OC. And you got to hope all that's still going to work out. Now they bring in. They have two running backs that were solid. They got rid of Carlos Hyde. They rolled the dice with Nick Chubb as a rookie, and he did pretty well. Duke Johnson did pretty well. And now, as I say, there's always drama. They're gonna risk the culture that's there. Hopefully they know something that we don't know about, whatever's going on with Kareem Hunt and whether or not he'll even be eligible to play. But they sign Kareem Hunt, and you're just kind of – I'm scratching my head as to all this, because if this backfires, you think they have a GM that finally has his pulse on what this team needs to do. And here you go inserting this into the equation, and I just say to myself, I smile, I'm just like, nah, still Cleveland.
Yeah, look, it's if it pans out for them, it'll look like a genius move. It feels like it's so hard for that to happen with these kind of circumstances. But hey, yeah, whatever.
It's bizarre to me, because they sent Josh Gordon packing, and everybody was thinking Josh Gordon was gonna fall on his face, or some drug test was gonna come out, and eventually how that story ended with the Patriots this year. So maybe they were smart and they looked like geniuses in hindsight there, but I don't know. I really don't, and I'm not going to dwell on it or whatever. That was just the news of the day. But heading into the Steelers' own house here, there's a laundry list of people that are kind of hitting the free agency wire, and there's some that are probably maybe higher profile than others on this list. And let's just start with the one that's the highest profile. Are we going to go through the same what do they say, the dog and pony show? I never understood that, but that's what went on with Le'Veon Bell. I don't understand it, but I'm going to apply it anyways. I don't see any situation here. A lot of people are already, rumor mill being as it is. Oh, well, the Steelers, they could transition tag him, but what do they risk losing if they transition tag and then trade? They're already looking at a third-round comp pick, because he will be one of the, maybe if not the highest paid free agent in this class, and the Steelers will get a compensatory pick in 2020. How that's all calculated, we don't know. There's hocus pocus there. But Bell will be one of the top 32 free agents without a doubt, and the Steelers will be compensated with one of these extra picks valued anywhere from round 3 to they go all the way to round 7, I think, with the comp picks. And whatever the valuation is the higher the pick or whatever you get, and there's no doubt that he's going to be a high pick. Why would they risk losing this compensatory pick unless they got something that was an immediate return on it? And they're also going to risk, not only ticking this guy off. He's not going to, I don't think he would sign whatever the transition would be. I don't think they would match if another team offers him something. You know what I mean? Or I don't know where they're going to go with this transition tag. It's different from the franchise tag, because then he can negotiate with other teams, and the Steelers, have this right of refusal and everything else involved with it. We saw it with Jason Worlds several years ago. So it's not like exclusive, and it's not, the franchise tag. It pays, transition tag pays a little lesser. It's a different factor of salaries that are into that whole equation. I just can't see them using any tag on Le'Veon Bell and putting themselves through all this torture when they know at the very minimum they're going to probably get a third-round compensatory pick next season.
Yeah, that's the problem with it. It's a risk. I know Jerry Dulac wrote an article about the fact that the Steelers are considering using the transition tag, and specifically only to then trade him. But the problem with that is the scenario gets really weird and hinky. If they transition him and he comes back with an offer and they decide to match that offer and sign him, they can't trade him to the team that they match the offer of, and if their signing bonus is not, they have to have another player lined up to trade him immediately. Otherwise, they're on the hook for the signing bonus of whatever goes into that deal. And they might get something out of it, but they might not. But if they end up not matching, then they've screwed the pooch on the third round pick, and then the following year, in my view, there's absolutely no reason to transition tag Bell. It's time to just say, look, we're done. Wipe your hands. Let him go. Find out where he can go. I've said this before. I'll say it again. I don't believe he's going to get the offers he thinks he's going to get, but we'll see. And let him go and get your third round pick in 2020 and just move on, because you don't need the headaches anymore. So in my mind, that's the best route to go. But, you never know. People think that they can be creative. I just can't see the Steelers trying to pull something like that off. To me, it's much more likely that they just part ways.
We're just talking about, the whole Kareem Hunt thing and bringing unwanted attention your way. That's all I see happening if they do something like this. Just let it go is the way I feel. I think they're fairly compensated with a compensatory pick, which that kind of system, I think, it rewards teams like the Steelers that build through the draft and just let some players go. And not necessarily that I am against it, because the Steelers have definitely benefited from it, but you see some other teams such as Baltimore Ravens do a lot of the same thing too, and it's kind of like, well, you don't retain your own players and then you get rewarded for it in a way. So there's still a benefit for them in that whole, how that whole system shakes out. It's not like, let's take one name on the list here, for example. Ramon Foster is a pretty high profile name on this list as well.
Yeah.
If Ramon Foster goes and signs somewhere else, he's 33 years old right now. It's not a huge cap number. I could see him returning for a year or two possibly, and we'll discuss that in a second. But if Ramon Foster does in fact go and sign somewhere else, they're not going to get anything for that. So Ramon, unfortunately, Ramon, as much as we love you, I don't think you're going to be one of the top 32 free agents in the NFL this year. And if you are, God bless. You know what I mean? Yeah. So we have someone else that we're going to talk about here in a second. But since we already brought up Ramon and he's on this list, how do you feel about Ramon's chances of coming back? I mean, he was pretty healthy all year. He's been he's plugged into the local market. He has a radio show every Tuesday morning that gets largely ignored compared to Ben's, and his is on earlier in the morning. Maybe people don't crawl out of the bed yet, but he says a lot of things. He has a lot of great insight. Very intelligent guy. That's also their collective bargaining guy, or he's their union rep, like the team rep for the NFLPA. So he wears a lot of hats too behind the scenes. So not only on the field, I don't know. I could see. I don't think he's like past his prime or washed up or anything of that nature where it would be like, nope, doors shut on this guy coming back. I could see something happening where the Steelers bring him back, maybe on a short-term deal, if he's willing to accept that kind of contract.
Yeah, the real question is going to be whether he's looking to score a big deal or thinks he can score a big deal out in the free agent market. I think the Steelers will make an effort to retain him. I think that it will be a fair deal, because I think that's what they do. It'll depend on whether the numbers match with what he wants to do. I agree with you. I think Ramon Foster is a very underappreciated player. He's a solid anchor. He makes a lot of the calls on the offensive line. He does a lot of other adjustments. He's the guy that turns around and communicates with Ben. And he's a solid contributor to that offensive unit and an important key. But BJ Finney has filled in quite nicely when Ramon has gone down on the occasion when he's been hurt or couldn't play. I don't think the Steelers they're not going to overpay him. So it really just depends on what's in his mindset and what he thinks his value is and what the Steelers think his value is. I would prefer to see Ramon stay, because he's got a great nickname, the Big Ragu. Let's keep the Big Ragu here and continue on from there. But we'll have to see how it pans out.
I'd like to call you the big ragu sometime.
I don't even like ragu, so I don't want. No, you call me the big. I don't know. I don't know a name of a pasta sauce other than ragu, but because I don't like ragu, don't call me that.
Presto. Is that one? Progresso. Geez, I don't know. I don't cook pasta.
I like that because I think progressively. That sounds good to me. I could be the big progresso.
That's kind of funny because I was just having this conversation. I was talking with my sister-in-law about cooking, and I've been doing a lot of cooking lately with, moving and my wife working out of town and things of that nature. And I said, one thing I'm kind of afraid to touch is pasta. So ragu falling into that category, I'm like, nah, I don't want to screw up pasta. I ate enough bad pasta as a kid from my mother. So I know what bad pasta tastes like. I don't want to be anywhere near it. Let's talk briefly about a few players that were on the list but are no longer on the list. And let me see, I'm pulling up right now just to make sure I got it current. This is from overthecap.com. Long snapper Cam Canaday signed. Jordan Dangerfield, safety, signed. Left guard, you may have forgotten about him, but Zach Banner, who was on the practice squad at various points and stuff like that, also signed. So those three gentlemen in the books here already for 2019. There's been some smaller futures contracts. Was this Robert Spillane, running back Malik Williams, Kevin Rader from Youngstown State is on a futures contract, and guys of that nature. One that flew under the headlines, I think, T. Gray Scales, a linebacker on a futures contract. Brogan Roback, you may remember him from Hard Knocks, is kind of the fourth string guy with the Cleveland Browns. Those are the guys they signed. So we're kind of going with higher profile here now with these names, and one of the ones that pops up on the list but is maybe factually incorrect according to Ed Bouchette. Pittsburgh Post-Gazette was asked in one of his more recent chats that Ryan Shazier was on the physically unable to perform or PUP list all last season. So according to Ed, his contract will toll, but at a significantly lower number than it was for last year, under $1 million. And he states here that the Steelers won't even have to sign him to a new deal, and that he was told this information at the Super Bowl the previous week. So that's some interesting information there. It looks like Ryan Shazier already in the fold. I don't know. There must be something that's like a loophole type thing, kind of like when Matt Bryant,
Martavis.
Thinking of the wrong guy there. He was just released from the Falcons. Martavis Bryant was suspended for that full year, and you kick the can down the road, and the contract's kind of almost extended because it wasn't used, I take it, so it tolls for that extra year. So they have a whole extra year now to see who, this young man, he still wants to play football, but for all intents and purposes here, he's running and everything else. I mean, it's remarkable to see the progress he made. Still terrifies me to even think about him putting on pads again. I mean, really, but they get to evaluate him. I mean, they were awfully patient with Sean Spence there for a couple of years as he rehabbed his knee, and he made a remarkable comeback. We could see the same thing, but just looking here at 2019, looks like Shazier is on the roster, even if he's on the PUP list again for the beginning of it.
Yeah, I think there's a good shot that if that's incorrect information, which I have no reason to doubt it makes complete sense. But if it is incorrect information, I think that they'll still work something out to keep him on the roster for a year. And I think that will go as it is, because the truth is he doesn't have a value as a free agent. Unless somebody else is willing to take the chance that he is going to be able to make a comeback. And as long as the Steelers see progress and value in keeping him here, and I think regardless of anything else, there's value in having Shazier on the team, on the sidelines, talking to the younger players. He's a film junkie. Having him is like having an additional coach around. So I like the idea of keeping him around, and I'm sure they will as best they can.
Yep, I'm totally with you there. Let's jump out on some of these other names. Ryan Shazier could be a whole episode in and of itself when we get to talking about him, and very inspirational, needless to say. Let's see, top of the list here, I got Tyson Alu. If you don't remember who that is, backup, I guess, defensive end. not really a defensive tackle, but you know how the Steelers use those guys anyways in the 3-4. He came in, 2 years ago, making about an average about $3 million. He's 32. I think he was a fine fill-in / backup rotational guy. I could see him coming back if he thinks the same, if he felt that he was a fit with the Steelers.
Yeah, I would like to see Alualu come back. I think he's been more than serviceable. I think he's contributed nicely as a backup, allowing them to have a nice rotation when needed. But, the age thing is the biggest concern because, we've seen it before. When these guys hit the wall, man, they just drop. So it'll be the question. You don't see any of that with Alualu yet. I think, again, it'll be a function of do the numbers work, and is it something he wants to do?
Yeah.
So I would like to see him back in the fold.
Yeah, I don't know that these guys have the same, battle wounds as other positions like running back, wide receiver, where, your speed is very important. As you hit 30 as a running back, it's already like the death knell. You got quarterbacks playing in their 40s, kickers that are going to be playing in their 50s, it looks like, when you talk about Adam Vinatieri. So it's all position dependent. So I do think Alualu, especially with, less tread on his tires, so to speak, over – well, how old did Kiesel hung it up at 38, I think? 37,
something
38,
like
yeah.
37, 38 maybe. Yeah.
And, he didn't have all that much tread on him at the beginning of his career and made the most of it at the end, and then had like a bonus year there where he came back, like he got to skip training camp and, being – at least the rooms there in St. Vincent have air conditioning. So as opposed to, some of these guys back in Gower's day even probably didn't have those amenities, and then they had, two-a-days and stuff still, I want to say, under the old CBA. So here's another guy here. Speaking of camp, I could see the Steelers totally going in another direction and at least bringing in someone to compete, or two someone's. I really thought they had this problem licked when it comes to the punter position, and Jordan Berry didn't necessarily have the hottest year. It wasn't necessarily as much of a downer as Chris Boswell, but there were some bad punts in there, and you can't afford to lose the field position battle in the NFL where parity is king. I'm going to go a push on this one. It's a coin flip as to whether or not they bring Berry back. It's not like he's making a huge number, but then again, you could probably bring in two guys for the same amount, just under $2 million, vet minimums or a street free agent or something of that nature. It'd be interesting to see because, you'd like to think they would still lean towards the vet, the kind of incumbent guy, but there's also some question marks there as well.
Yeah, I think Berry will get a shot to win his job, and I agree with you. I think that there'll be competition in camp. If he's the guy that comes out on top, then I think that he'll be there, and if he doesn't, if he gets outperformed by another punter, then he won't be. So they'll work something out, but I don't expect them to sign him to anything long term. He hasn't been consistent enough, although I think he's better than a lot of people give him credit for. He's got great accuracy in getting the ball inside the 20, but every now and then he shanks one and everybody loses their mind. So.
Yeah. Well, no, he's been very good with that. I actually went through like 70 or so of his punts from like 2 seasons before to prove that this is one thing. Like, there's a reason there's not fantasy punters. There's not really like a good statistic for punting because you might be punting from, I don't know, your own 45 or something and have to try and pin someone in within the 20 or something. So you're only going to, you don't have a very long punt, so to speak, or you could be just cross the middle of the field and it's just out of field goal range or something of that nature. That certainly happens, and that could totally skew you versus like a really terrible team where just kick it as hard and as far as you can. So then it makes guys look like a superstar. Anthony Chickillo, backup outside linebacker, next guy on this list. Seems like Chickillo is almost a free agent or getting signed and pinged around all the time. They don't have a whole lot of depth there when it comes to their outside linebackers. I could see Chick coming back for on the cheap. To say that, I hate saying that because I want these guys to all make money, but it is what it is.
Look, 1.9 million is. If that's cheap, sign me up for cheap like that all day.
Oh
long,
yeah,
okay?
I'm speaking relative in terms to Le'Veon Bell's 14.5 here. You know what I mean?
But look, it's as you said, it's relative. As you're talking about a top running back versus a backup outside linebacker who has not wowed, right?
And then talking 1.9 million versus what you or I or anyone, any other commoners or Hammondagers or whatever, are making.
Yeah, I'll take that salary any day. Look, they don't have a lot of proven depth, but they've got Ola, they've got Keon Adams coming back potentially. I don't know. This is one. It won't surprise me if he comes into camp and is allowed to compete. It also won't surprise me if he's not, because at some point you accept that the experiment hasn't worked. The production that they're getting from Chicolo when he's in is minimal. So I just don't know. It won't surprise me to see them move on from him.
Interesting. Now, let's talk about the next guy here. Kind of a surprise. We didn't think he was going to be on the roster a couple of times here. You may remember a comment of 2 dogs, 1 bone with Cody Sensabaugh and Ross Cockrell. Cody Sensabaugh had a year last year, believe it or not, and it wasn't like people weren't testing him at points, but he was certainly looking better than the alternative that was Artie Burns. Again, I'm going to say all intents and purposes a lot in this show, but you can pretty much maybe Artie may get some chances in camp to show that, I had a bad year. But there's a lot of risk in playing Artie, and I think we are all aware that the Steelers are going to be looking at corner once again, if not with their top pick when you talk about draft needs. But they can maybe insulate themselves once again instead of bringing in another veteran. Maybe this is a guy that they feel comfortable enough with that I don't know that he'll get a whole lot of feelers out there, and you know what I mean? He didn't have them to begin with. That's how he ended up here with the Steelers. And they always like to, when they have a position that's weak in the offseason that they're not certain about, they usually draft a guy and sign a guy. I could see them bringing Cody Sensabaugh back, and I'd be totally okay with that. I'm going to get a lot of people that are going to be in the comments, oh, he's terrible. Look, and now I'm going to say something else that's going to totally bite me in the rear end, but I'm going to say, look at what Pro Football Focus even thought, and they don't usually think too highly of some of these guys. Cody Sensabaugh had a pretty respectable year as far as, targets in his pass coverage, and I could see him returning.
Yeah, I would never in a million years have projected myself saying this at the beginning of the season, but I agree with you. I thought Cody.
I thought that's what you meant, was you could never see yourself agreeing with me.
Well, I can see myself agreeing with you at times, but I could not see myself saying that Cody deserves another shot, because I was ready to cut him at the beginning of the year.
Yes.
And I think he performed well when needed. Your scenario is correct. They like having a veteran presence outside of just Joe Hayden. I think they like to have a veteran backup. I think Cody can potentially fill that role, and he certainly has proven to be starter capable when necessary. I think they absolutely want to upgrade from Cody, but that doesn't make his value to the team any less, because I think they really see him as a backup player. And provided he doesn't have a greater sense of himself because of the wizardly wonders of PFF, getting in his head, and they can sign him for a number that works for them, I think he will be back. If he starts thinking he needs Alford numbers, forget it. He's not going to. But
that Alford contract was sick. It's some big dollars there. But hey, when you're a team like Arizona, you have nowhere else to go but up. Steelers need to try and maintain something. I mean, up would be a good direction for them. They could still fall, so got to make the right moves there. I'm going to stay in the secondary. I'm going to jump down this list to someone who is hold on, I'm looking here. Exclusive rights still. So exclusive rights. Kind of, it's almost like the restricted free agent thing. Really can't negotiate. It's almost like when you sign these guys, like with these future contracts, they end up making it. You get to really kind of extend and play out this contract, much like they did with Alejandro Villanueva, and then they rewarded him early. We could see an early reward here with nickel corner Mike Hilton. I think he's certainly deserving of it. I don't see the Steelers moving off of him whatsoever. You can't let this guy out the building, so to speak. So and I don't think he can't go anywhere since he's exclusive rights. So I would say Mike Hilton returns for 2019. maybe, when they have these exclusive rights things, sometimes the agents play this deal of let's do a 1 year and then see from there and try and get these guys a bigger money thing. But at the same time, I would really like to get this guy something more long term and keep him, on the roster for 3 or 4 years. So it'll be interesting to see what the Steelers do here.
Yeah, and I, when you're talking about exclusive rights free agents, I think that Steelers can just offer him and basically they say, here's what we're going to offer you, and you have to take it.
Yeah.
It's either take it or don't play. So the agent can complain or whine or say they want this, but Villanueva was in the same position, and people were having a hissy fit because they thought he deserved to get paid, and he did. And I think Mike Hilton is going to be in the same boat. He has played much better than I think anybody really expected. He's been, I think there was some slide last year where he wasn't as effective, but still nonetheless, he's the best, nickel corner they've got. I could see them, trying to sign him for a more long-term deal at something that is reasonable, not crazy numbers. But if they can't work it out, they're also just going to say, okay, well, he's theirs. So he'll be back. There's no question in my mind.
It kind of reminds me of somebody like, Eli Rogers being another example of that type of, when you have guys that are unsigned from college, you kind of go all over the place with these rookie contracts, especially like when they're signed to specific contracts and end up making it like the futures contract. That's a really neat deal. Eli Rogers finds himself as an unrestricted free agent this year, a little bit different situation as in previous years with him. We could kind of lump this together with Darius Hayward-Bay, who's also going to be an unrestricted free agent. Both are wide receivers. And one other gentleman, Justin Hunter, who Ben Roethlisberger killed in a game this year by overthrowing him a little bit, and he laid out for a ball and popped his shoulder. And I'm kind of wondering the fate of all these guys, and I guess it really rests on the fate of one Antonio Brown as to figuring out everything else, because then the cupboards get a little bare, because then all you have is, you have Juju, obviously, not too bare. You don't know who James Washington is yet, and really in the case of Eli, you have somebody that's almost a very similar player in Ryan Switzer, so it wouldn't surprise me if Eli Rogers has moved on from, but he could also come back. We know he could return punts in a pinch. He has that experience there. He's been with the team. I don't know he gets a lot of feelers elsewhere. Darius Hayward-Bay, that's a tough one. He's a primarily special teams guy. Can still fly down the field, still has a reputation for not catching the football, has a good reputation for blocking. And then Justin Hunter is kind of in the same, career reclamation mode when he joined the Steelers as DHB did. I think both DHB and Hunter, actually all three of them, it could be either way. You have three guys here. I anticipate the Steelers drafting another, and I mentioned three guys they already have on the roster, potentially four, depending on the Antonio Brown thing. How many wide receivers do you keep? I think there's only one of these guys that gets signed, and then maybe they draft someone, and it's going to be a battle to even see who they sign making the roster, unless they keep six wide receivers again.
Yeah, Eli, I don't know. I think he'll get a shot, because I don't think he's, as you said, I don't think he's going to get a lot of attention from other teams. So I think he'll come to camp. He'll get a shot to compete. He's going to be essentially competing for a role that Ryan Switzer took over. Hay-Bay has been a core special teams guy for them, but his age is getting up there. I don't see them signing him to anything beyond a vet minimum contract, if that, for a single year. And he may just decide that's it. He doesn't want to do it at that rate. He's not going to start. Obviously, he's not going to get consistent time playing because he's too inconsistent catching the ball. And, you're right. The big question mark here is what happens with Antonio Brown. What they do in the draft is in many ways going to be predicated by what they do with Antonio Brown. If Antonio Brown is gone, wide receiver becomes a higher priority. If Antonio Brown is still there and they feel they can work something out that, he is a more palatable teammate and they can keep things acceptable. And I'm not even talking with really the locker room. I'm talking with management and the coaching staff and whatever relationship he has to have with those guys, because that's where you've got some untenability at this point. So they've got to fix that. And if they do, then maybe he stays around. Both Zach and I have said this in a couple podcasts. I know you've said it, that, you're not sure what should happen. I am officially on the he needs to be gone train, but I accept the fact that he may not be.
You're talking about AB?
So we'll have to see. Yeah, I'm talking about AB.
Okay, just to clear it up.
He's got to be gone, but he may not be. And that's going to depend. That's really going to predicate what they do with wide receivers, because if they draft one high, that guy's going to get a roster spot. If they draft one in the lower rounds, he's going to be a guy that has to fight for a spot.
Correct.
So we'll see. And, you've got James Washington. Juju's going to be solid. It's going to be a group to watch. There's no question about that. And I do think that there's a good chance that this puts guys like Eli on the outside looking in. But we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, I think the only other thing that could change their minds when it comes to Eli is, let's just face it, he's not 6'4", 6'5". So, yeah, and that's what bodes in the favor of a DHB or a Justin Hunter. You can't teach that, as they say. Let's go a little lightning round here with a few names. Dan McCullers, maybe.
I think that's exactly where I'm at with Dan McCullers. If they don't come up with a draft pick that can replace him, then he gets a shot. Otherwise, he's gone.
Stephen Ridley, running back, gone.
Bye.
Yep, yeah. I think so. Jalen Samuels more than plenty, and you never know who else they may look at. Plus Ridley, 30 now, 30 years old. That's
exactly.
That's that age there. That's the cliff, unfortunately, the wall. Nat Burhay, the missile. I don't know about this one. I think they did all right without him, and he was just a 1 year anyway. So I think he's gone.
I unless there is something very specific to special teams and they don't have a guy to fill the role, or he's going to, take the place of a guy like Darius Hayward-Bay as a core special teamer, I can't see them hanging around with him.
Yeah, I mean, they drafted Marcus Allen, who they're probably going to get more reps. They already made a decision on Jordan Dangerfield. I kind of think that signals a little bit of significance there.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at some of the quick fire guys. A couple of friends of the show, including one of our hosts, Trey Johnson, although most people don't realize he was on injured reserve. He'll be a street free agent, and, he didn't really get a shot yet, so we'll see. There's a couple of guys like that on this list that were, camp guys, practice squad guys, futures guys. Jake McGee, they put him on IR. I think there's a good chance he comes back to camp. Joseph Cheek, a tackle. Keith Kelsey, inside linebacker. Malik Golden. I think McGee has the best shot of all of those guys. And then another gentleman who's been on the show, LT Walton. I think it is what it is with LT. I mean, he's been fine. It's a guy that they've had under contract. He hasn't done anything to not be on the roster, but he hasn't really done anything to be on it either. And I think that's the same case as what you said with Dan McCullers. If they have somebody they find that can replace him or both of them, to be completely honest, because let's face it, defensive lineman, that might be, hey, we trim a number here and add a linebacker or something. That's certainly possible as well.
Yep. Yeah, I think, look, LT Walton, again, he's been serviceable, but he hasn't been outstanding. And I don't know. You give these guys enough time to try and develop, and if they don't start to make consistent progress, then you cut bait and you move on. So it'll depend on where they end up with the draft. If they sign, a mid-level veteran like Alu during free agency, that could signal the end for an LT Walton or a Dan McCullers. I think, a lot of these guys, like you were mentioning, Malik Golden, Kelsey, they're all exclusive rights guys. So, I think that they'll probably get some kind of offer unless they look at them and go, no, you just weren't good enough. And they'll just be camp bodies again. And then, then there's a couple of guys on this list, though, who I think, as we get into them, are going to warrant some attention and are going to be the more controversial, so to speak. What do you do with them kind of guys? And I don't know who you wanted to start with, but I'm going to talk about B.J. Finney.
Well, B.J. Finney and Matt Filer, I was going to get around the offensive line and close out. You got to talk about there's one linebacker in particular that's another one besides, Shazier, and we got tight ends.
Yes, there is.
Yeah, go for it. B.J. Finney, I think he's got to be back. I think that's a big you put a big price tag on him versus like Ramon Foster. Like who do you keep? You got a guy who plays center and guard and has played in Foster's place. I mean, that's where a tough call may be. How much money do you throw at somebody that's essentially the sixth lineman off the depth chart? You know what I mean? And then Filer was playing in place of Marcus Gilbert. There's some question marks there, too, with Gilbert, but we won't get into that necessarily today. But I think both guys are valuable.
Absolutely. Filer is the easier one because he's an exclusive rights guy. So they're going to keep Filer one way or the other. Finney is a restricted free agent. Which I don't remember, but I think essentially means they get first right of refusal.
Yeah, there's some type of offer thing. I think you got a pony. Well, you know what? I don't think there's a pick associated with it since he was undrafted. It's a little bit of a different scenario versus like Manny Sanders from several years ago when they ended up, ponying up a little bit of money and bringing him back. I think that was of Ben's request too. So, it's basically just a match in his situation.
Yeah, I think that he's intrinsically linked with what happens to Ramon Foster, right? If they can't work a deal out with Ramon, then they're going to end up paying Finney more because he's going to jump into that spot. If they can work something out with Ramon, then they will work something out with Finney. Again, Finney has been a valuable guy. He's played well when he's played, and I'm certain it's a guy they want to keep. It's the question will just be how does it all fit into the financial
as it always is
standards.
There is a cap.
Yeah,
There's only
absolutely.
so much they're allowed to spend, and some teams have more to spend than others. And depending on what happens with all of these other moving parts, the Steelers could actually have some wiggle room or have no wiggle room. So that actually kind of plays into this is kind of interesting. A guy that always seemed to be looking to replace is Jesse James, but yet Jesse has been, I want to say, a valuable component to their success at different times. And yes, he did catch the ball. I'm still a firm believer of that. If they had a sky judge like the Alliance does, I do believe we might be in a better place as long as that sky judge isn't somebody like Tony Crente or Pete Morelli. Anyway, somebody could screw it up anyways. And then Xavier Grimble's the other guy. And Xavier Grimble, I don't even know how Xavier Grimble, he's listed here as a restricted free agent. This guy, he's all over the place. This has been a journeyman player throughout his whole career. I think he's carved out a solid little niche with the Steelers, but this is going to be a nice draft for tight ends as well. This is going to be another guy battling for a camp spot, I believe, this year. He had to fight off Bucky Hodges, who they picked up during, Hodges came in like the middle of camp last year, I want to say. So he was at a little bit of a disadvantage. But I can see both of these guys actually coming back for the right price tag.
I think Jesse, they'll try and keep Jesse. They'll try and work something out with Jesse. I'm not forgiving on the X-Man at this point.
Oh, I know why. Yeah, good point.
Yeah, absolutely. I look, as they say, in a lot of other teams, he'd have been gone the next day after that fumble.
Yeah.
And because it is, even when you come out and say, I know I could have scored without doing what I did, but I wanted to run him over. No, dummy, score.
Yeah, well, you're alluding to the Denver Broncos game, what would have been the opening, the first touchdown for the Steelers, and instead of just,
absolutely.
Just going.
Nothing.
Yeah, he went to try and mow the guy down, and that was Tony Crede, by the way, who refereed that game. He got it right, but it was plain as day, and I just please don't be plain as day. Yeah, it's plain as day on the review, and that started the slide, folks. That was the loss. They were on a hot 6-game win streak, and Grimble fumbles it out of bounds. But we let the cat out of the bag on this last name we have to cover. I don't think there was anyone else that really stood out. I think we caught all the ones that we needed to, except for LJ Fort. Mort, who you talk about, Cody Sensabaugh and a guy that you thought was going to be gone in camp and everything like that. I was the same way. And you know what? I was kind of banging his drum, but I didn't want to get too overzealous, like how Zach Celadonio always does with us, and he gets giddy over, the shiny new toy. I thought he did pretty well when Ryan Shazier, considering there was no one else to fill in for Shazier when he was hurt. And he was, like I say, many times he had a very nice, I think it was the Ravens game where he swatted a ball down right in the middle of the field. It was a huge play on like a third down. He nearly did it again against the Jaguars. It was right off of his fingertips, and had he done that, maybe things would have worked differently in that game, and he would have been a hero and a name you would have really known. Instead, I looked at him as a guy who was no longer practice squad eligible, a guy who had been released, terminated. If you remember that, everyone made a meal of the wording for that when he was released that one time. And he's been on and off the roster, and he found himself playing a very significant portion of snaps after not really playing at all at the beginning of the season. He ended up playing over 29% of the snaps with this team. He's 29. He was cheap. He's athletic. He can do some of the things they like to do in this defense. And I think, like we've said with veterans and veteran presence, this is a guy I think that you tab on keeping, and I do believe he's not going to have a whole lot of suitors either. And I think this is another situation where this is a player that could look and see, hey, this is what the Steelers have done for me. Okay, I'm back. And I do think it'll be probably a 3-year deal. It would be my guess. Maybe not huge money. It's backup money, still the same. But I would also like to see him return, as well as I am predicting that he will return.
Yeah, I think if they can get LJ to sign a deal for something like 3 years for $4.5 million, maybe $5 million, it's okay money, but it's not great money. As long as he's not getting suitors, I think he'll sign it. And I think he provides them, again, it's a position where they lack depth, and he gives them some depth. So he's worthwhile keeping around. And he's a solid special teamer when he plays on special teams. And I think, he outperformed our expectations last year in a lot of cases. So, you get rewarded when you do that. So hopefully they'll work something out with him.
Yeah, I agree. Looks like the Steelers are just a little over $19 million in cap space, according to Over the Cap as well. I was trying to find where that was in the grand scheme of things. They're trending toward the bottom, but it's better than what they've had in recent years. I mean, they don't have like $50 million or something or whatever that the Indianapolis Colts have to pursue certain players, and it's going to be interesting to see. I don't think that also accounts for. There's a lot of funny accounting going on too, because Le'Veon Bell was not paid, and that money has to go somewhere as well from last season. So they may have a little more in the coffers, and we'll see how all that legalese ends up playing into what the Steelers do. I mean, free agency about a month around the corner here now, so a decent topic here. We'd like to hear what you guys think. I mean, there isn't, I don't know. There isn't a whole lot of players here I see where you're just, aside from Le'Veon Bell, where you say la vie, you're on your way out the door, because I think a lot of these are affordable contracts. These are role players and guys that certainly fit the Steelers mold.
Yeah, we've gotten very used to them not being big players in free agency, and everybody is speculating they may be a little bit bigger. I don't expect that at all. I expect them to take care of the guys that are on this list that they want to, and do the same thing they've been doing, which is find a minimum or a low key signing of a vet that they think can help them. And there's other things that are going to play into that. Morgan Burnett's has to be released, even though he's under contract. He's not a free agent. Do they release Morgan Burnett? Do they eat up some of this cap space or free up some cap space with Antonio Brown? Do they re-sign Ben or extend Ben and free up some cap space that way? There's a lot of things that still can play into this to give them more wiggle room in free agency. But, for people who think they, not that the Ravens are going to let C.J. Mosley get away, because they're not. But if they did, for people who think that the Steelers are going to be able to go in heavy on those kind of guys, they're just not.
No, that's
it's not.
No, when I see those lists, I kind of chuckle because about 80% of those or 85% of those men are not going anywhere. So
yeah, absolutely.
You don't let them out. You're not going to let them out the door. You'll get a little tease like Drake Kirkpatrick tried to do a year or two ago, and I'm glad that he stayed with the Bengals. That's where he belongs. So.
Absolutely.
Like that and being posterized. And speaking of posterized, our poster boy here, Brian E. Roach, thank you for joining us once again, as always.
I'm always glad to be here, man. It's nice to be back in the familiar confines of the two of us, chatting up some Steelers football, and getting ready for what will become a busy season as the draft gets closer.
Yep, we'll have some draft stuff coming up here soon, including, I believe, another mock draft and also talking about the Steelers team needs. So that'll do it for us here at Steel City Underground for this episode. Don't forget to subscribe, folks, and leave us your comments. Until next time, his name's Brian, my name's Joe. Be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.